The grand ballroom of the Everly Charity Gala shimmered under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the rustle of expensive fabrics as guests moved about in their finest attire. Men wore tailored suits, their cufflinks catching the light, while women dazzled in designer gowns adorned with sequins and jewels. It was a night meant for celebration, a gathering of the city's wealthiest and most influential individuals coming together to raise money for a good cause. Amidst this sea of glamour stood Eleanor Hayes, a woman who seemed entirely out of place. She was in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back into a simple bun and wearing a modest floral dress that looked more appropriate for a family picnic than an upscale gala. Her shoes were plain flats, scuffed slightly from years of use. While others carried themselves with practiced elegance, Eleanor moved hesitantly, clutching a small handbag tightly against her chest. She hadn't expected to be here tonight. In fact, she hadn't even realized she'd been invited until weeks ago when a formal envelope arrived at her doorstep. At first, she thought it must have been sent by mistake. After all, she wasn't someone who belonged in these circles. But curiosity got the better of her, and after reading the invitation over and over again, she decided to attend. After all, it was for charity, and maybe she could learn something or meet people doing important work. As soon as she stepped inside the venue, however, Eleanor felt the weight of countless eyes on her. Some glanced at her briefly before turning away, dismissing her as irrelevant. Others lingered longer, their expressions a mix of confusion and amusement. "Who is that?" one woman whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear. A man standing beside her chuckled. "Looks like someone wandered in off the street," he replied, earning a ripple of laughter from his companions. Eleanor pretended not to notice. Instead, she focused on observing the scene around her. Servers wove through the crowd carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres. Tiny bites of food perched delicately on crisp crackers or nestled in miniature cups. She hesitated before taking one, unsure if she should help herself. When a waiter offered her a glass of champagne, she politely declined and asked for sparkling water instead. This choice drew another round of smirks from a group of women nearby. "Oh, look," one of them said mockingly. "She's sticking to the cheap stuff." Despite the unkind remarks, Eleanor refused to let them bother her. She told herself that these people didn't know her story. They didn't understand why she was here or what she represented. Still, it was hard not to feel self-conscious as she navigated the room alone. She tried striking up conversations with a few attendees, but they quickly lost interest once they realized she wasn't connected to anyone famous or powerful. One man cut their chat short with a curt nod, muttering something about needing to network elsewhere. What none of them knew was that Eleanor had every right to be there, not because of wealth or status, but because of the values she held dear. Beneath her unassuming exterior lay a lifetime of sacrifice, hard work, and quiet generosity. Born into a humble family in a small rural town, Eleanor had grown up surrounded by love rather than luxury. Her parents worked tirelessly to provide for her, teaching her the importance of kindness and community. Tragedy struck early in her life when both her mother and father passed away in a car accident, leaving her orphaned at just 12 years old. Neighbors rallied around her, ensuring she never went hungry or without support. Their compassion left an indelible mark on her heart, shaping the person she would become. Years later, after excelling academically thanks to scholarships, Eleanor became a teacher. She loved working with children, instilling in them the same sense of empathy and resilience she had learned growing up. Then, unexpectedly, her life changed forever when an elderly aunt left her a sizable inheritance, including shares in a tech startup that skyrocketed in value. Overnight, Eleanor found herself among the wealthiest individuals in the country, yet instead of embracing a lavish lifestyle, she chose to live simply, continuing her teaching career and donating anonymously to causes she cared about deeply. Now, standing amidst the opulence of the gala, Eleanor couldn't help but marvel at how different this world was from the one she knew. The extravagance was overwhelming. The towering floral arrangements, the golden table settings, the endless flow of fine wine. But beneath the surface, she sensed a certain emptiness. Conversations revolved around wealth and influence, with little mention of genuine human connection. People seemed more interested in being seen than in making a real difference. As dinner preparations began, Eleanor took a seat at a table near the back of the room. Around her, guests continued to whisper and snicker about her presence. One woman leaned toward her companion and said, "Honestly, I think she might be lost. Maybe we should point her to the coat check." Another added, "Or the parking lot." They erupted into giggles, clearly enjoying themselves at her expense. Yet Eleanor remained calm, sipping her water and glancing occasionally at the stage where speeches would soon begin. She reminded herself that their opinions didn't matter. What mattered was the reason everyone was here, to support a worthy cause. And though she doubted many of these people truly understood hardship or struggle, she hoped that perhaps tonight they might open their hearts and their wallets to those in need. Little did they know Eleanor was about to show them exactly what generosity looked like. Eleanor's journey to the gala had been anything but ordinary. Her life was a tapestry woven with threads of hardship, love, and quiet perseverance, qualities that shaped her into the person she was today. Born in the small, sleepy town of Maplewood, Eleanor grew up in a modest home where the windows rattled during storms and the floors creaked with every step. It wasn't much, but it was filled with warmth. Her father, John, worked long hours as a mechanic, his hands calloused from years of fixing cars. Her mother, Margaret, ran a tiny bakery from their kitchen, selling pies and bread to neighbors who often paid with kindness rather than cash. Life wasn't easy for the Hayes family, but they made the most of what they had. Every Sunday, the three of them would sit around the worn wooden table, sharing stories and laughter over plates of Margaret's famous apple pie. Eleanor learned early on that happiness didn't come from material possessions. It came from the bonds you shared with others. Her parents taught her the value of hard work, humility, and compassion, lessons she carried with her throughout her life. Tragedy struck when Eleanor was just 12 years old. On a rainy evening, her parents were driving home from a community event when their car skidded off the road and crashed. The news shattered Eleanor's world. One moment she was a carefree child with dreams of becoming a teacher. The next, she was an orphan grappling with unimaginable loss. Neighbors rallied around her, taking turns caring for her until arrangements could be made. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived down the street, opened her home to Eleanor, offering her a place to stay and a shoulder to cry on. The months that followed were difficult. Eleanor struggled to adjust to her new reality, but the kindness of those around her helped her find strength. She began helping Mrs. Thompson bake cookies for church fundraisers, finding solace in the rhythm of kneading dough and measuring ingredients. Slowly, she started to heal, learning to lean on her community in ways she never thought possible. That sense of belonging stayed with her, a reminder that even in the darkest times, people could come together to lift each other up. As Eleanor grew older, she threw herself into her studies, determined to make something of her life despite the challenges she faced. School became her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on her future and dream of brighter days ahead. Her teachers noticed her dedication and encouraged her to apply for scholarships. With their support, Eleanor earned a spot at a nearby university where she studied education. She worked multiple part-time jobs to cover living expenses, often juggling shifts at a diner while completing assignments late into the night. It wasn't easy, but she refused to give up. After graduating, Eleanor returned to Maplewood to teach at the same elementary school she had attended as a child. She poured her heart into her work, believing deeply in the power of education to change lives. Her classroom became a haven for students who needed extra encouragement or guidance. Whether it was helping a shy child gain confidence or tutoring a struggling student after school, Eleanor gave everything she had to ensure her kids succeeded. Many of her former students still spoke fondly of her years later, crediting her with instilling in them a love of learning and a belief in themselves. But fate had one more twist in store for Eleanor, one that would alter the course of her life forever. When she was in her mid-30s, an elderly aunt named Clara passed away unexpectedly. Clara had been a distant relative whom Eleanor rarely saw, but she left behind a surprising inheritance: shares in a little-known tech startup. At the time, the company was still in its infancy and Eleanor didn't think much of it. She filed the paperwork away, assuming the investment wouldn't amount to much. Years went by, and Eleanor continued living her simple, unassuming life. She rented a cozy apartment, drove an old sedan, and spent her weekends volunteering at the local food bank. Teaching remained her passion, and she took pride in knowing she was making a difference, however small. Then one day, she received a letter from her financial advisor. The tech startup she had inherited shares in had grown exponentially, transforming into a global powerhouse. Overnight, Eleanor became one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. At first, she couldn't believe it. Wealth was foreign to her. It felt like something out of a fairy tale. But instead of letting it change her, Eleanor chose to use her newfound fortune to help others. She established a trust fund to manage her assets and began donating anonymously to causes close to her heart. Over the years, she funded scholarships for underprivileged students, supported homeless shelters, and contributed to medical research initiatives. Her generosity touched countless lives, though few ever knew her name. Despite her immense wealth, Eleanor lived as humbly as ever. She wore the same clothes she'd always worn, ate meals prepared in her modest kitchen, and avoided drawing attention to herself. To her, money was simply a tool, a means to make the world a better place. She found joy not in luxury but in knowing she could ease someone else's burden or brighten their day. Her philosophy was simple. True wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents but in the impact you had on others. Now sitting in the glittering ballroom of the Everly Charity Gala, Eleanor reflected on how far she had come. She thought about her parents, whose love and sacrifices had shaped her character. She thought about the neighbors who had taken her in when she had no one else. And she thought about all the students she had taught over the years, each one carrying a piece of her with them as they ventured into the world. The whispers and snickers of the gala attendees barely registered in her mind. She understood that they judged her based on appearances, assuming she didn't belong among them. But Eleanor knew better. She knew that wealth didn't define a person. It was their actions, their values, and their willingness to give back that truly mattered. And tonight, surrounded by people who cared more about prestige than purpose, she felt a quiet resolve building within her. Though she appeared unremarkable to the crowd around her, Eleanor carried a legacy of resilience and kindness. Her story was proof that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. And as the evening unfolded, she would remind everyone present, including herself, that sometimes the simplest acts of generosity can leave the deepest impressions. As the gala moved into its main event, the atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted. The chatter softened, and the guests turned their attention to the stage, where Richard Langley, the gala's organizer and a man known for his larger-than-life personality, stood ready to address the crowd. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, Richard exuded confidence as he adjusted the microphone and flashed a practiced smile at the audience. His presence commanded respect, or at least admiration, from those seated below, many of whom had paid hefty sums just to be in the same room as him. Richard began his speech with flair, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, pausing dramatically for effect, "tonight is not just about celebration, it's about action. It's about coming together to make a difference in the lives of those who need it most." He gestured toward a large screen behind him, which displayed images of children receiving medical care. "This year we are raising funds to build a new wing for St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, a place where hope will flourish, where dreams will be nurtured, and where lives will be saved." The audience erupted into polite applause, though some clapped more out of obligation than genuine enthusiasm. Richard continued, his tone growing more theatrical. "But let me be clear, this is no small undertaking. Building such a facility requires significant resources that only individuals like yourselves can provide. Tonight, I ask you to dig deep. Let us show the world what true generosity looks like." He paused again, scanning the room. with a smug grin. Of course, I'm not suggesting pocket change here. We're talking about meaningful contributions. 6 figures, 7 figures if you can manage it. After all, isn't that why we're here? To prove that we're not just successful but also compassionate? His words hung heavy in the air, dripping with condescension. Eleanor, sitting quietly at her table, listened intently. She could feel the weight of his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering on the wealthiest attendees. Each mention of 6 figures or 7 figures seemed designed to shame anyone who couldn't or wouldn't contribute at that level. Around her, people nodded approvingly, eager to align themselves with Richard's vision of philanthropy. But beneath the surface, Eleanor sensed something troubling, a subtle competition brewing among the guests. One by one, names were called, and pledges began rolling in. A tech mogul promised $500,000, earning a round of applause. A real estate tycoon followed with a cool $1 million, eliciting even louder cheers. Each announcement was met with increasing excitement, as if the donations were less about helping children and more about showcasing wealth. Eleanor watched silently as the numbers climbed higher, feeling both impressed and disheartened. Impressed because the money would undoubtedly do good, disheartened because it felt like charity had become another form of performance art. Meanwhile, the whispers about Eleanor hadn't stopped. If anything, they grew louder as the evening progressed. At nearby tables, guests openly mocked her appearance and speculated about her financial status. One woman draped in diamonds leaned toward her companion and whispered loudly enough for Eleanor to hear, "Do you think she actually plans to donate? Maybe she'll write a check for $50 and call it a night." Her friend giggled, nodding in agreement. "Oh, definitely. Look at her dress. It probably cost less than my manicure." Eleanor pretended not to notice, keeping her focus on the stage. She sipped her water slowly, her expression calm and composed. Inside, however, she felt a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to confront the rude remarks, to remind these people that kindness shouldn't come with a price tag. But another part of her understood that their judgment stemmed from ignorance. They didn't know her story, and perhaps they never would. For now, she chose to rise above their cruelty, finding solace in the knowledge that her actions, not her appearance, would speak for her. At one point, a waiter approached Eleanor's table with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She politely declined, explaining that she wasn't very hungry. This decision sparked yet another wave of ridicule. A man seated 2 tables away smirked and muttered to his date, probably trying to save money for her donation. Can't blame her, I doubt. She's ever seen a 5-star menu before. His comment drew laughter from those around him, but Eleanor remained unfazed. She glanced at the couple briefly, meeting the man's eyes with a look so serene it almost startled him. For a moment, he hesitated, as if sensing there was more to her than met the eye. But then he shook off the feeling, turning back to his conversation with a shrug. Despite the mockery, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness for these people. Their obsession with appearances blinded them to what truly mattered. They judged her based on her clothes and demeanor, assuming she had nothing to offer. Yet none of them stopped to consider that generosity came in many forms, and that sometimes the most impactful gifts came from the least expected places. As the pledges continued, Eleanor noticed how carefully orchestrated the entire process was. Richard encouraged donors to stand and announce their contributions personally, ensuring maximum visibility. Those who pledged smaller amounts were thanked curtly and quickly ushered off stage, while larger donors received extended praise and photo opportunities. It was clear that this event wasn't just about raising money, it was about elevating egos. Eleanor found herself reflecting on the nature of giving. Was it really about recognition, or was it about making a difference? She thought about the countless hours she had spent volunteering at shelters, the scholarships she had funded anonymously, and the joy she felt knowing her actions improved lives, even if no one knew her name. To her, generosity was a quiet act, free from expectation or reward. It was about lifting others up without needing anything in return. Finally, after nearly an hour of speeches and announcements, Richard stepped back to the podium. "Before we conclude tonight's program," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "I'd like to invite anyone else wishing to contribute to come forward. No matter the size of your gift, every dollar counts. Together we can create a brighter future for the children who need it most." The room fell silent as all eyes scanned the crowd, waiting to see who might step up next. Some attendees exchanged glances, silently daring each other to make a move. Others checked their phones or sipped their drinks, clearly uninterested in participating further. Eleanor sat still, her hands resting lightly on her lap. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. For years she had given quietly, preferring to remain invisible. But tonight felt different. As she looked around the room, at the opulent decorations, the self-congratulatory speeches, and the mocking faces, she realized she had an opportunity to teach a lesson. Not just to the people laughing at her, but to everyone present. True generosity wasn't about showing off or competing. It was about humility, compassion, and making a difference where it mattered most. With that thought firmly planted in her mind, Eleanor made her decision. She rose slowly from her chair, smoothing her floral dress as she prepared to walk toward the stage. The movement caught the attention of several guests, who turned to stare in disbelief. Whispers rippled through the room once again, this time tinged with curiosity rather than disdain. "Is she going up there?" someone asked incredulously. "What does she have to give?" another replied, their tone laced with skepticism. Ignoring the murmurs, Eleanor moved steadily forward, her steps deliberate and confident, her heart beat faster with each stride, but she refused to let nerves get the better of her. She had lived a lifetime of quiet strength, and tonight she would channel that strength into something extraordinary. Little did anyone know, the simple woman they had dismissed was about to leave them speechless. Eleanor's journey toward the stage felt like it lasted an eternity, though in reality it was only a matter of seconds. Every step she took seemed to echo louder than the last, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The murmurs grew, louder, more urgent, as guests craned their necks to see what this unassuming woman intended to do. Some leaned forward in their seats, intrigued despite themselves, while others exchanged skeptical glances, convinced that whatever Eleanor had planned would be insignificant. When she finally reached the podium, Richard Langley looked momentarily startled. He hadn't expected anyone else to come forward, especially not someone like her. For a brief moment he faltered, unsure how to proceed. But professionalism quickly took over, and he stepped aside, gesturing for Eleanor to take the microphone. As she adjusted its height slightly, the room fell silent, every eye fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Eleanor cleared her throat softly, her voice steady but gentle as she began to speak. "Thank you for allowing me to say a few words," she said, her tone warm yet firm. Her accent carried hints of her rural upbringing, a stark contrast to the polished cadence of the evening's previous speakers. "I may not look like much to some of you, but I believe deeply in helping those in need. That's why I'm here tonight." The audience stirred, unsure where this was heading. A few people exchanged amused smirks, assuming Eleanor was about to announce a modest contribution, $100 perhaps, or maybe even less. They were prepared to clap politely and move on, already dismissing her as irrelevant. But Eleanor wasn't done yet. She paused briefly, letting the anticipation build. Then, with quiet confidence, she continued. "Tonight, I'd like to donate." Another pause, just long enough to make the crowd lean in closer. $10 million for... A split second, there was absolute silence. It was as if time itself had frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. Even Richard Langley, who prided himself on being unflappable, dropped his pen mid-note-taking, his jaw slack with shock. Then, as the magnitude of her announcement sank in, chaos erupted. Gasps filled the air, followed by the clatter of glasses hitting tables and chairs scraping against the floor, as people stood up abruptly, unable to contain their astonishment. "Did she just say 10 million? Someone whispered hoarsely, their voice barely audible over the growing din. "She must be joking." another replied, shaking their head in disbelief. But Eleanor wasn't joking. She stood calmly at the podium, her expression serene, as if she had simply announced the weather forecast instead of dropping a bombshell that left the entire room reeling. Cameras flashed wildly as photographers scrambled to capture the moment, while reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, trying to piece together who this mysterious woman was and how she could possibly afford such a staggering sum. Richard Langley recovered first, his practiced smile returning as he stepped back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, struggling to maintain composure, "it seems we have witnessed something truly extraordinary tonight. Let us all give a round of applause to Ms. Eleanor Hayes for her incredible generosity." The applause began hesitantly but quickly grew into thunderous cheers. People rose to their feet, clapping and whistling, their earlier mockery forgotten, or at least buried beneath layers of embarrassment. Eleanor nodded graciously, offering a small smile before stepping away from the podium. As she returned to her seat, she could feel the weight of countless eyes following her, their expressions a mixture of awe, admiration, and lingering disbelief. Back at her table, Eleanor sat quietly, sipping her water as if nothing unusual had happened. Around her, the mood had shifted dramatically. Guests who had once ridiculed her now approached her eagerly, eager to shake her hand or exchange pleasantries. One woman wearing a gown adorned with sequins gushed, "Ms. Hayes, I must admit, I underestimated you. Please forgive me. I had no idea." Eleanor smiled kindly, brushing off the apology. "There's nothing to forgive," she replied. "We all make assumptions sometimes. What matters is what we do with them." Another man, a wealthy investor who had earlier joked about her attire, leaned in earnestly. "Ms. Hayes, your donation is, well, it's inspiring. Would you consider joining our foundation's board? We could use someone with your vision and values." Eleanor shook her head gently. "Thank you for the offer, but I prefer to stay out of the spotlight. My goal has always been to help quietly, without fanfare." Her response only deepened the admiration in the room. People marveled at her humility, her refusal to seek recognition or reward for her actions. In a world where wealth often equaled ego, Eleanor stood apart, a beacon of grace and selflessness. As the gala drew to a close, conversations buzzed with excitement. Attendees couldn't stop talking about Eleanor's unexpected announcement, speculating about her background and motivations. Some wondered aloud how they had misjudged her so completely, while others vowed to rethink their own approach to giving. Even Richard Langley admitted privately that he had underestimated her entirely. "She's a force to be reckoned with," he told a colleague. "I'll never look at someone the same way again." For Eleanor, however, the evening was bittersweet. While she was pleased to have made such a significant impact, she couldn't help but feel saddened by the initial reactions she had faced. The mocking whispers and cruel jokes still lingered in her mind, a reminder of how quick people were to judge based on appearances. Yet she also recognized that her actions had sparked something important, a shift in perspective, however fleeting it might be. By the time the final toast was raised, Eleanor knew she had accomplished far more than simply donating money. She had challenged the room to confront its biases, to reconsider what true generosity looked like. And though the night would eventually fade into memory, the lessons she imparted would remain, etched into the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed her act of quiet courage. As she prepared to leave the ballroom, Eleanor glanced around, one last time. The glittering chandeliers, the ornate decorations, the sea of designer dresses. It all seemed so distant now, almost surreal. She slipped out unnoticed, her floral dress blending seamlessly into the night. To the world, she was still the simple woman who had walked into the gala unnoticed. But inside, she carried the knowledge that sometimes simplicity held the greatest power of all. The aftermath of Eleanor's announcement rippled through the gala like a tidal wave, leaving no corner of the opulent ballroom untouched. As the initial shock began to settle, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. The once dismissive glances and snide remarks were replaced with wide-eyed admiration and sheepish apologies. People who had laughed at her mere hours ago now approached her with newfound respect, their earlier ridicule buried under layers of guilt and awe. Eleanor handled it all with remarkable grace. She accepted handshakes and compliments without arrogance, brushing off effusive praise as if it were nothing more than polite conversation. When one woman gushed, "You've changed my perspective on giving," Eleanor simply smiled and said, "I hope we can all focus less on how much we give and more on why we give." Her words carried a quiet wisdom that resonated deeply with those around her. Despite the adulation, Eleanor remained grounded. She declined every invitation to join boards, attend exclusive events, or even pose for photographs. "This isn't about me," she told Richard Langley when he suggested organizing a press conference to celebrate her contribution. "If you want to honor my donation, use it to make life better for the children who need it most." Her humility struck a chord with many attendees. Some admitted privately that they felt ashamed of their earlier behavior, not just toward Eleanor, but in general. One man confessed to his wife, "I've spent years chasing recognition for my donations, making sure everyone knows how much I've given. But tonight, I realize that's not what truly matters. It's about making a difference, not getting attention." Others took immediate action, inspired by Eleanor's example. A prominent real estate developer stood up during the closing remarks and announced an additional pledge of $2 million, citing Eleanor's generosity as motivation. Several other guests followed suit, raising the total funds collected, well beyond expectations. By the end of the evening, the gala had secured enough money to not only build the new hospital wing, but also fund advanced medical equipment and specialized training programs for staff. As the event drew to a close, Eleanor quietly slipped away from the crowd. She didn't wait for a formal send-off or linger for final goodbyes. Instead, she retrieved her coat from the check room and stepped out into the cool night air, unnoticed by most. The valet brought her modest sedan, a car so unassuming that it looked almost comical parked among the fleet of luxury vehicles, and handed her the keys with a courteous nod. Sitting behind the wheel, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the faces she had seen inside, the wealthy elites who lived lives vastly different from hers, yet shared the same capacity for compassion when reminded of its importance. She thought about the children who would benefit from the hospital wing, their futures brighter because of the collective efforts of strangers. And she thought about her parents, whose lessons of kindness and resilience had guided her throughout her life. Driving home, Eleanor felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her decision to attend the gala had been spontaneous, driven by curiosity rather than any grand plan. Yet here she was, having made an impact far greater than she could have imagined. The experience reinforced her belief that true change often came from unexpected places, and that even the simplest acts of courage could inspire others to do better. A ripple effect beyond the gala. In the days following the event, news of Eleanor's extraordinary donations spread like wildfire. Local newspapers ran headlines proclaiming her as the silent philanthropist, while national outlets picked up the story, dubbing her act of generosity a masterclass in humility. Social media buzzed with reactions, ranging from heartfelt admiration to calls for greater transparency in charitable giving. Countless people expressed gratitude for Eleanor's reminder that wealth wasn't defined by bank accounts, but by the willingness to uplift others. Yet despite the media frenzy, Eleanor refused to engage. She turned down interview requests, ignored phone calls from reporters, and politely declined offers to speak at conferences or appear on television. To her, the attention was unwarranted. She had acted out of conviction, not a desire for fame. "I don't need the spotlight," she told her financial advisor when he urged her to capitalize on the positive publicity. "Let the work speak for itself." While Eleanor stayed out of the limelight, her actions continued to inspire those around her. Back in Maplewood, where she taught elementary school, whispers of her generosity reached her colleagues and students' families. At first, no one believed it. How could their soft-spoken teacher possibly be the same woman featured in glossy magazine spreads? But as details emerged, Disbelief gave way to pride. Parents began volunteering more at the school, teachers collaborated on community service projects, and students started organizing fundraisers for local charities. Eleanor's quiet influence extended far beyond the confines of the gala, sparking a chain reaction of goodwill. One afternoon, a group of fifth graders surprised Eleanor with handmade thank you cards. "Dear Ms. Hayes," one read, "thank you for showing us that anyone can make a big difference. You're our hero." Another card featured a colorful drawing of a hospital with the caption, "Because of you, kids will get better." Eleanor teared up as she read each note, touched by the sincerity of her young students. For her, there was no greater reward than knowing she had planted seeds of kindness in the next generation. A legacy of quiet strength. Though Eleanor avoided public recognition, her impact was undeniable. Construction on the hospital wing began, within months thanks to the record-breaking funds raised at the gala. Named the Hayes family wing in honor of Eleanor's late parents, the facility became a beacon of hope for countless families facing medical challenges. Doctors praised the state-of-the-art equipment, nurses marveled at the improved working conditions, and patients benefited from cutting-edge treatments that might otherwise have been unavailable. Meanwhile, Eleanor returned to her quiet routine, teaching by day and volunteering by night. She rarely spoke about the gala, preferring to let her actions speak louder than words. Still, reminders of that fateful evening occasionally surfaced. Once, while grocery shopping, a stranger approached her and said, "You probably don't remember me, but I was at the gala. What you did, it changed my life, thank you." Eleanor smiled warmly, replying, "It wasn't just me, it was everyone who contributed. Together we made something beautiful happen." Her response encapsulated everything people loved about her: her humility, her inclusiveness, and her unwavering belief in the power of collective effort. Though she never sought validation, Eleanor's legacy grew steadily, touching lives in ways both visible and unseen. Lessons learned. For the attendees of the Everly Charity Gala, Eleanor's presence served as a powerful reminder of the dangers of judgment. Many admitted that they had initially dismissed her based on her appearance, assuming she had little to offer. Their embarrassment over this mistake fueled a broader conversation about privilege, perception, and the importance of looking beyond surface-level impressions. Richard Langley, in particular, underwent a personal transformation. Known for his flashy demeanor and competitive approach to philanthropy, he began advocating for more inclusive fundraising strategies. "Eleanor taught me that generosity isn't measured in zeros," he said during a later speech. "It's measured in heart." Even those who hadn't attended the gala felt its ripple effects. Across the country, stories of anonymous donors and grassroots initiatives gained traction, inspiring individuals to rethink their own roles in creating positive change. Eleanor's name became synonymous with selflessness, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when stripped of ego and pretense. A quiet ending, a lasting impact. Months later, as construction on the hospital wing neared completion, Eleanor visited the site for the first time. Standing outside the building, she watched workers put the finishing touches on the structure that bore her family's name. Tears welled in her eyes as she imagined the countless lives that would be saved within its walls. "I wish you could see this," she whispered softly, as if speaking to her parents. "You'd be proud." When the ribbon-cutting ceremony took place, Eleanor declined to attend, insisting that the focus remain on the hospital's mission rather than her contribution. True to form, she chose instead to spend the day tutoring a struggling student, helping him grasp a difficult math concept. For Eleanor, these small moments mattered just as much as the grand gestures. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, each one contributing to a better world. And so, Eleanor Hayes faded back into obscurity, content to live her life as she always had, simply, humbly, and with boundless compassion. Though few knew her full story, her actions spoke volumes, proving that greatness often hides in plain sight, and that sometimes, the quietest voices carry the loudest messages. Eleanor Hayes returned to her quiet life as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The gala felt like a distant memory, a fleeting moment in time that had come and gone. Yet its impact lingered, not just in the lives of others, but within Eleanor herself. She carried the experience with her, not as a badge of honor or a story to tell, but as a reminder of the power of humility and the importance of staying true to one's values. Her days resumed their familiar rhythm. Mornings began early, with Eleanor preparing lesson plans for her elementary school class. Afternoons were spent grading papers or meeting with students who needed extra help. Evenings found her volunteering at the local food bank, sorting donations and packing boxes for families in need. To anyone observing her routine, there was no indication that she was anything other than an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. But those who knew her, even slightly, understood that Eleanor was far from ordinary. Back in Maplewood, whispers of her generosity continued to circulate. Parents marveled at how someone so unassuming could have such a profound influence. Teachers spoke of her dedication to her students, recalling countless instances where she went above and beyond to ensure every child felt valued. One colleague remarked, "She doesn't just teach math and reading, she teaches kindness. That's her real legacy." The hospital wing named after Eleanor's parents opened its doors 6 months after the gala. It quickly became a cornerstone of the community, providing state-of-the-art care to children from all walks of life. Families traveled from miles away to access treatments they couldn't find elsewhere. Doctors praised the facility's design, which prioritized patient comfort and healing. Nurses spoke of the joy they felt working in an environment built with love and purpose. And patients, they simply called it the place where miracles happen. Despite her refusal to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Eleanor's presence loomed large over the project. Her name appeared on plaques throughout the building, accompanied by quotes about compassion and resilience. A mural painted in the lobby depicted hands reaching out to one another, symbolizing unity and support. A fitting tribute to Eleanor's philosophy of giving without judgment. Though she avoided the spotlight, word eventually reached Eleanor about the wing's success. Friends and neighbors shared updates describing the smiles on children's faces and the relief in parents' eyes. Each story warmed her heart, reinforcing her belief that even the smallest actions could create ripples of change. "It's not about me," she often said when people thanked her. "It's about what we can do together." Inspiring others, Eleanor's act of generosity sparked something remarkable in those around her. People began rethinking their own approaches to charity and community involvement. In Maplewood, a group of high school students launched a fundraising campaign to build a playground for disabled children, inspired by Eleanor's example. Local businesses organized drives to collect supplies for homeless shelters, citing her commitment to helping others as motivation. Even individuals who had never considered themselves philanthropists started finding ways to contribute, whether through volunteering, donating unused items, or simply offering a kind word to someone in need. One particularly touching story emerged from a nearby town. A young woman named Sarah, who had attended the gala as part of her internship with a nonprofit organization, credited Eleanor with changing her career path. "I used to think I needed to be rich or famous to make a difference," Sarah explained during a podcast interview. "But watching Ms. Hayes reminded me that it's not about how much you give, it's about the intention behind it. Now, I'm pursuing a degree in social work because I want to dedicate my life to helping others, just like she does." Stories like these spread far beyond Maplewood, inspiring strangers across the country. Social media campaigns encouraged people to perform random acts of kindness, using hashtags like #BeLikeEleanor to track their efforts. News outlets highlighted everyday heroes, teachers, nurses, volunteers, who embodied the same spirit of selflessness Eleanor demonstrated. Slowly but surely, her quiet courage ignited a movement, proving that one person's actions could inspire countless others. A life of purpose for Eleanor. Life continued much as it always had. She taught her classes, tended to her garden, and spent weekends baking pies for the church bake sale. Her modest home remained unchanged, save for a few new photographs on the mantel, snapshots of smiling children sent by grateful parents whose Lives had been touched by the hospital wing. These images brought her immense joy, serving as reminders of why she had chosen this path in the first place. Occasionally, Eleanor allowed herself moments of reflection. She thought about the journey that had led her here, the hardships of her childhood, the loss of her parents, the kindness of neighbors who had taken her in. She remembered the lessons she had learned along the way, that wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in relationships, that happiness came from giving rather than receiving, and that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. These reflections weren't tinged with sadness or regret. On the contrary, they filled her with gratitude for the life she had lived, the people she had met, and the opportunities she had been given to make a difference. "We're all connected," she once told a friend. "What happens to one of us affects us all. If we can remember that, maybe we'll start treating each other with more compassion." An enduring legacy. Years passed, and Eleanor grew older. Her hair turned fully silver, and her steps slowed slightly, but her spirit remained as vibrant as ever. She retired from teaching at the age of 70, though she continued volunteering and mentoring young educators. Her former students kept in touch, sending letters and visiting whenever they could. Many credited her with shaping their worldview, teaching them not only academics but also empathy and resilience. When asked about her secret to happiness, Eleanor often replied, "It's simple. Be kind. Help where you can. And don't worry too much about what other people think." Her words resonated deeply, becoming a mantra for those fortunate enough to hear them. Eventually, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by memories of a life well lived. Tributes poured in from around the world, celebrating her as a symbol of quiet strength and boundless generosity. The hospital wing she had helped fund stood as a testament to her enduring legacy, welcoming new generations of patients and families with open arms. In Maplewood, a plaque was erected in her honor outside the elementary school where she had taught for decades. It read, "Eleanor Hayes, a teacher, a giver, a beacon of hope. May we all strive to live as she did, with humility, grace, and love." The quiet power of goodness. Eleanor's story is a reminder that greatness isn't defined by titles, wealth, or fame. It's found in the everyday choices we make, the decision to extend a hand, to listen without judgment, to give without expecting anything in return. Eleanor didn't seek recognition. She simply followed her heart, trusting that her actions would speak for themselves. And speak they did, echoing far beyond the confines of a single gala or hospital wing. Today, her name may not be widely known, but her impact endures. Countless lives have been touched by her generosity, directly or indirectly. Children who might otherwise have gone untreated now thrive thanks to the care they received. Communities have grown stronger, united by a shared commitment to kindness. And individuals everywhere carry a piece of Eleanor's legacy, striving to make the world a better place in their own small ways. In the end, Eleanor Hayes proved that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we leave behind. Not in the applause we receive, but in the hearts we touch. Hers was a life of quiet strength, lived with purpose and love. And though she may have walked among us unnoticed, her light continues to shine brightly, illuminating the path for future generations to follow.